There is no doubt that Arc Raiders is one of the most polished Unreal Engine 5 games to date. Embark Studios' custom work on the engine has paid off, delivering a game that not only looks great but also runs noticeably smoother than most recent UE5 titles. That said, Arc Raiders wasn't flawless at launch, as it suffered from several visual issues that required additional polish. Since then, the game has received numerous updates over the past 2 months, with the most significant one, at least technically, being the December update 1.7.0. This new update introduced a new cinematic preset that affects all graphic settings, and this new preset comes with an additional performance cost that ranges from 30 to 40% depending on the scene. So in this video we are going to re-examine each graphic setting and compare the options from my optimized settings against Epic and Cinematic to evaluate the visual differences as well as the performance penalty that the new cinematic option brings to each setting. While testing this new update, I noticed something unusual. The frame times weren't as consistent as I remembered. At first, I thought the recent updates had affected frame rate stability, but after more testing, I discovered the main culprit, NVIDIA Reflex. We've seen this issue multiple times, especially in Unreal Engine 5 games, and unfortunately Arc Raiders is no exception. As you can see here, there are more spikes in the frame time graph when Reflex is enabled, and the same issue shows up on the RTX 4070 Super as well. While Reflex does improve PC latency, the overall frame time graph is noticeably worse. So if you are seeing micro-stuttering or uneven frame pacing, I recommend disabling Reflex. Let's take a quick look at the performance difference between the launch version and the latest update, using the optimized settings at 1440p with DLSS quality. On average, there is around an 8% performance improvement, which isn't significant but also not something I expected, especially since the game's performance was already great. Now, as we discussed in the previous video, the most noticeable visual issue in Arc Raiders was the poor quality of ambient occlusion, especially the noise it exhibited on foliage and vegetation. And this issue was more noticeable when using the DLSS transformer model. I don't know exactly which update fixed this, but I am happy to report that this issue has been significantly alleviated. Even when using the DLSS transformer model, foliage now looks more stable and the overall image is noticeably cleaner. In my previous video, I recommended the CNN model mainly because of this issue, but now the transformer model is a much better choice. While it still has some minor issues with particles and volumetrics, these are far less noticeable, and overall it delivers significantly better image quality compared to the CNN model. Now let's move on to the graphics settings, starting with view distance. This setting sees one of the largest changes with the new cinematic preset. As you can see here, cinematic significantly pushes the draw distance and improves the level of detail compared to Epic. But this improvement comes with a hefty cost. Here there is around a 12% performance hit when going from low to Epic and 23% when switching to cinematic. In other scenes, however, cinematic is far more demanding, with a 39% cost, and it can go up to 49% in some other scenes. So for this one, I recommend avoiding cinematic and sticking with high or Epic. Another setting that sees a noticeable improvement with cinematic is anti-aliasing. This setting mainly affects TSR and TAAU, and it didn't offer a meaningful quality improvement relative to its performance cost. But now, as you can see here with TSR at 1440p and 67% resolution scale, cinematic produces a sharper and more stable image. And performance-wise, it comes with a 17% cost compared to 8% for Epic. So in practice, I can only see one clear use of cinematic TSR. If you can afford the performance hit and you can't use DLSS or FSR4, this can be a solid alternative to improve image quality, as it looks noticeably better than XeSS and FSR3. Moving on to shadows, and similar to view distance and anti-aliasing, shadows benefit heavily from the cinematic preset. Here we can see more shadow detail with the cinematic option in addition to better draw distance, with more and higher quality shadows cast by distant objects. As a result, cinematic exhibits less shadow pop-in and smoother cascade transitions compared to Epic and the other options. Performance-wise, there is an 8% cost when going from medium to epic and 21% when switching to cinematic. But this cost can climb to 28% in scenes with more visible shadows like here. Therefore, I recommend avoiding cinematic and sticking with high or even epic if you have enough performance to spare. Next, we have post-processing. When it comes to ambient occlusion, cinematic slightly decreases the intensity of the effect and the dark halo that SSAO can produce. For depth of field, I couldn't notice any difference between epic and cinematic. Both look pretty much identical. As for other post-processing effects, the only notable difference is that cinematic slightly improves the quality of bloom, as you can see here. Performance-wise, moving from medium to epic carries about a 5% cost, while going up to cinematic increases it to around 13%. So for this one, I recommend sticking with high or epic if you don't mind the depth of field effect. The visual benefits of cinematic are not that noticeable during normal gameplay and definitely don't warrant the performance hit. Let's move on to texture. In terms of texture resolution and anisotropic filtering, epic and cinematic look virtually identical, while high shows slightly weaker texture filtering as you can see here. The real and most noticeable difference is in texture streaming. Notice how both high and epic exhibit significantly more texture pop-in compared to cinematic, which looks much more stable and maintains higher texture quality while moving through the environment. And the good news is that cinematic texture has minimal impact on both VRAM usage and performance. Therefore, I highly recommend switching to cinematic. Moving on to effects. Terrain quality looks identical between high, epic, and cinematic. Only medium shows a noticeable drop in quality as you can see here. Where cinematic has a more visible impact is with volumetric clouds. In this scene, cinematic adds more cloud detail compared to epic and high. And in this other scene, there is more noise in the clouds with high and epic, while cinematic produces a cleaner look. Performance-wise, there is a 13% hit when going from medium to epic and 18% when switching to cinematic. But in other scenes like this, the cost is even higher, around 20% from medium to epic and 24% when moving up to cinematic. So visually, I don't think epic or cinematic offer enough to justify this significant performance cost. That's why I recommend sticking with high effects. For the last three settings, the cinematic preset doesn't make a meaningful difference in either visuals or performance. Screen space reflections look identical between epic and cinematic as you can see here. Only medium reduces SSR coverage and quality, and performance-wise there is no difference between the options. The same applies to foliage. There is a clear increase in foliage density when moving from low to epic. But stepping up to cinematic doesn't add any visual improvement, and performance between epic and cinematic is also identical as you can see here. Finally, for global illumination resolution, going from medium to epic slightly improves clarity and lighting precision on finer meshes. However, cinematic doesn't provide any additional visual benefit, and performance is also identical between epic and cinematic as you can see here. So overall, Update 1.7.0 is a mixed but largely positive step forward for our creators. Average performance has improved slightly, which isn't something I expected from a game that was already performing well. And the ambient occlusion noise has finally been fixed, which is a huge visual win. On the other hand, the current NVIDIA Reflex implementation is clearly problematic, as it negatively impacts frame time consistency and can introduce micro-stuttering despite the latency benefits. As for the new cinematic preset, in Unreal Engine 5 this preset is not intended for normal gameplay. As its name suggests, it's primarily designed for cutscenes, trailers, and offline captures. And we can see why in this game we're looking at settings like view distance or shadows, where cinematic delivers the most noticeable visual upgrades, but also comes with a massive performance cost. That said, this doesn't mean the cinematic preset is entirely unusable. Texture is the first setting I strongly highly recommend pushing to cinematic, as it significantly improves texture streaming and reduces textures pop-in without introducing a meaningful performance or VRAM penalty. Anti-Aliasing is another area where cinematic can make sense under the right conditions. While the performance cost is noticeable, it significantly improves TSR image quality, making it a much better option than FSR3 or XeSS for those who can't use DLSS or FSR4. Before ending the video, I want to give a quick shout out to my Patreon. If you are able and would like to directly support my work, consider becoming a patron to get access to the highest possible quality of my latest videos, including this one. And a big thank you to all my supporters, and thanks to you as well for watching until the end. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, and if not, leave a dislike. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any future videos, and hopefully I'll see you all in the next one.